Today's date is 11/22/2015, and we are here at Dennis Dooley's house.
Donald
E. Dooley's house. Donald E. Dooley's house in Evansville, Indiana. And Donald served in World War II on this ship that's right above him. That's a picture of his ship. And we're going to talk about that ship and talk about where he was born and why he got into World War II and what the whole process was when he was in the Pacific War. And his birth date, parents, and wife, and how many children. And Don, you go ahead and tell us your birth date and where you were born.
I was born on September 15th, 1926, in Chicago, Illinois, on the south side of Auburn Park. And I grew up there and went to Governor Oglesby School for grade school, and I went to Chicago Vocational School, where I mostly studied for the 3 years in electrical studies. And that's what really helped me out when I was aboard ship. I became an electrician. But I was spent when I came out of Chicago Vocational at 17 years old, why my buddy and I joined the Navy and wound up at Great Lakes Naval Training Base. And from there, after boot camp, I was sent to Fort Pierce, Florida, in the amphibious department, and where I served on a World War I wooden gunboat for some time along the Florida coast, and then I was transferred up to Norfolk, Virginia, to the camp up there, where I had more training in gunnery and fighting fires aboard ship. And then after that, I wound up in Solomons, Maryland, and we went out in the Atlantic. And in the cold weather, the waves would splash on the guns and freeze, and we had a time using steam hoses to get the guns cleared up so we could use them if we had to. Excuse me. And after that, they were needing us in the Pacific, so I was put aboard a troop train in Washington, D.C., and went across the country in a troop train, and these boxcars were converted into living quarters, and wound up in Portland, Oregon, where I lived in the shipyards in Portland, Oregon, until the boat that I was going to be on was commissioned. After that, we took the boat along the west coast from Portland, Oregon, down to San Diego, and from San Diego, after a time there practicing invasions, we went to Pearl Harbor.
What year was that about when you went to San Diego, and what date about in ballpark? Was that 1945?
That was, I think in early 1945.
Okay. Then you went to Pearl Harbor. Go ahead. You're doing real well.
From Pearl Harbor, we traveled to, I believe, Kwajalein and Eniwetok, and from there to Saipan, and from Saipan to the Tinian Islands in Marianas. And after, like I say, being next to the beautiful Indianapolis that came in from San Diego, which we didn't know, but they had the atomic bombs on there that they put on the Enola Gay. And after that, we went on a convoy, an 87-ship convoy that we took to Okinawa. And coming into Okinawa, I know the big battleships were shooting 16-inch shells over our heads, and they were whistling, and we were hoping they wouldn't fall short. But it was lighting up Okinawa just like it looked like city of Chicago with all the lighting that was going on there and the bombs going off, and it was quite a sight, and everything was really unbelievable. You know, for somebody who was only 18 years old, it was pretty remarkable at the time.
You were one of the youngest in World War II. You were 17 when you got in, born in 1926. You were a baby of World War II. Some people were born in 27, but you're about the youngest to get in World War II and see some action. So when you saw the invasion of Okinawa, that's April 1st of 1945. It is actually the biggest invasion in World War II, bigger than actually D-Day in Europe when you add up the number of ships in the invasion. Lots of coral reef over there. It was not an easy invasion. The coral reef stretched out close to 3 football fields in length away from the island, so it's not the sandy soil like you see in D-Day movies in Normandy.
Right.
Much more difficult for ships to get in. But a convoy of 87, you could not see the beginning or the end of your convoy, and your gunship protected the convoy all the way from Tinian to Okinawa. Mm-hmm. Now, when you saw, my father was there in the same invasion you were. He was on LST, and he'd always tell me when he would see all the gunfire at night, every time he saw fireworks at night, he'd say, Okinawa was just like that, but 10 times more. I don't know if it seemed like that at night to you with gunpowder.
Absolutely. It was an amazing light show, you know, that was going on. And Japanese planes were, of course, coming over too, so they were shooting up at them. We tried to keep our planes down because we were firing not only toward shore, but firing at the Japanese planes that was coming in. And it was a big battle, and the Japanese knew as we were getting closer to them that it was something they would want us to get stopped, you know. So it was pretty harrowing experience, especially for all of us young fellows. It was, you know, a lot of our crew, most of them was pretty young. We had some fellows that were from the Tuscaloosa that was sunk, older fellows, and they were more used to the action than us younger fellows were.
Can you tell us a little bit about fear? I mean, the human being has a innate part of them that survival is very strong instinct. And, you know, I know you're very Christian, but it's still very fearful. When you were there, you didn't know if you were coming back. And can you tell us a little bit about your fear factor in World War II and what you thought about even coming back to the United States?
Well, to be honest with you, at the young age that I was, I think with a lot of other fellows, we didn't realize the fear that was there when the planes would fly over or drop bombs or do any strafing or anything else, you know. Why, then we got a little fearful, I would say. But other than that, you know, some days it was just like a routine. We got into such routine, you know, that all we thought about was, you know, I was trying to keep the electrical power going aboard ship and everything else. And everybody had their own job. And that's, you know, mainly what we thought about, unless there was general quarters, and then everybody was at the guns and everything else, you know.
So a lot of part of war is to keep you busy. You had jobs to do. If you just sat and daydreamed, you'd get a lot of fear would bother you, but your job to keep the electrical up. But when you did go to general quarters, you did get a little scared then, did you not?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The bell would ring and you'd go to general quarters?
Oh, yeah. The sign would go off and on. You knew GQ, you had to get to your station, wherever that happened to be, you know. And it was at that time, why, that was the scary moments, when you went up to the guns and you didn't know whether you were going to be shooting at planes or kamikaze planes or kamikaze boats. And sometimes both of them came after us. Sometimes a kamikaze would come up, and when you were shooting upwards toward planes, why the kamikaze boats would come in, especially toward the end after we had dropped the first atomic bomb and everything else. And we were around Hagushi Bay, and we were trying to protect the Aishima because the Japanese wanted to take that back, and Jimmy Doolittle and his group was flying in and out of there to do raids in Japan. So they were trying to come after us there, and it got pretty hectic at that time.
If when FDR died on April 12th of 45, I guess you got news of that. Did that affect you and affect the other the shipmates when he died on April 12th? Did you think that was going to be a problem for the United States?
Well, we didn't really. I don't think we ever gave that much thought that anything was going to be changing. Another thing, while I was there at Aishima, and I did go to shore from time to time.
Tell us where Aishima is on part of Japan. There's several islands in Japan.
Yeah,
Tell us what part of...
Quite a number of islands. I really don't know. There's a chain of them, and we were at different places. We spent time at Naha and Aishima and Gushi Bay and Hutton Cove. We spent time, and that's where we rode out most of the typhoons that hit us. We went into Hutton Cove to protect us because we couldn't handle the typhoons head on. We were just too small of a boat, But another thing, while I was at Aishima, I visited the grave of Ernie Pyle, who was killed there on Aishima. Yes. And he was, of course, from Dana, Indiana.
He was killed after the war was over.
And
he was killed at the end of the war. The Battle of Okinawa was really over.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was really quite a thing to go aboard. And we went on different islands that we were on, and we actually picked up about 10 lepers and brought them to another place from one small little island that was sticking out like a rock sticking out of the water. And I don't know how they got there or anything else. And we picked up some of our troops that were on there doing radar duty there and letting us know if the Japanese were coming over. And we were doing radar picket duty and going up along all the different islands there. And then, of course, we were preparing for the invasion of Japan. And we had all of our magazines were loaded with ammunition, and we even stored ammunition on the deck. So our skipper said, if we get hit going into Japan, we're going to go up like a skyrocket because of all this ammunition and everything. So it was that was pretty thought-provoking when we thought about we might do hand-to-hand fighting if we got stuck on shore. He said people might come after us with pitchforks, and it was thank the Lord that now. Twice, I think that when the Japanese said they surrendered, they and the war was over, they hit us with kamikaze planes and suicide boats twice. And so we couldn't really trust them that the war was really over for some time. We were always, running general quarters and everything else because somebody saw or heard something. And there were times when we were close to shore that anchored off shores, the Japanese would swim out, and they got on a boat near us and went down in the sleeping quarters and knifed a bunch of fellows down there and got away. So we had to pay strict attention because a lot of the islands that they said were secured there were Japanese back in caves and everything else, and so it was quite tricky, you know, to be close to shore where they could come out after you in the dark, which they did in some cases.
They never got on your ship, though.
No, as far as I know,
yes.
They never came aboard our boat.
When the Enola Gay dropped the bomb on August 6th, did the word pass to you and then Nagasaki a few days later? And how did that influence your thoughts about your invasion of mainland Japan? If you'd invaded mainland Japan, you may not be here today.
That's correct, yes.
We'd have lost.
I believe we were going to hit around Nagasaki is where we were going, I believe, go into.
In September, there. Probably, or late August or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you didn't see any of the remnants of the Enola Gay or the bombings?
No, I sure didn't.
Tell us a little bit about your, we're going to go over to this map, and your son's going to point out the blue line with a pointer here, and he will point out the blue line starting up in the Marshall Islands, and then he'll be up by the Marshall Islands here. I'm going to go with the camera, and then you tell us Tinian was a very important part of this. You've got this old map of World War II, global war, and then we're up here in the Marshall Islands. Can you tell us up by the Gilbert Marshall Islands, you started with your cortege, your flotilla at that point, didn't you?
That's correct.
And so the blue line there, Dennis, the blue line, the whole flotilla then went to Mariana Islands next, is that right?
Yes.
And then the blue line over the red line, on top of the red line there. No, down lower. Yeah, then keep following. Okay, right here, then the Marianas, then you keep on going there. Then we went over to Okinawa and the invasion over all the way where the circle is, all the way further. And that's where you were, and then you went back on the red line there at a later time, yes. So that's pretty much a map that that Mr. Dooley has preserved, and this is a very old map. Now, I'm going to have my film on this ship, and you know it by memory, so you just tell me a little bit about this ship. And this is a ship, had no name, but tell us about that, about your ship, Don. Tell me about the ship, how long it is, what the length of that ship is.
I believe it's 119 feet long and 23 feet wide, and it had no keel. It was flat bottom. We drew about maybe 3 foot at the most in the bow, and about 5.5 feet at the stern, and we had a wrench that was on the back of the ship, and that was the anchor that we would drop going in close to the shore. We would drop that, so if we got stuck on the beach, we could be pulled back by using our winch. Yeah. And but we had 3 40-millimeter guns, 2 forward and 1 aft, and we had 4 20-millimeter guns, 2 on each side, starboard and port, and some were on the main deck where I was stationed, and the upper deck we had guns up there on the upper deck, and also I had about 3-inch rockets that I loaded. They were against the bulkhead in the front of the bow of the ship, and whenever we were getting close to shore, why I loaded the rockets in the launchers, and then the fire control man up in the top on the control tower, why he was the one that fired the rockets. And the no fun thing was if the rockets didn't go off, any of them didn't go off, I had to go back in there and put a ground clip on them so they wouldn't go off. So that was a little tedious there.
You were the electrician, so that was pretty scary going in there, because they could have exploded in your hand. You not be with us right now.
And that fellas did hurt when I was in Fort Pierce like that, and in Norfolk, Virginia. Fellas had accidents with them, or carrying the rockets in their arms like a baby, like they told us to carry them, and that was kind of dangerous.
I'm on the rockets right now. It's near the front gun on the bow of the ship. And those little rockets, are they there or are they back further?
They were right behind the 40-millimeter.
Okay, I'm focused on that.
Yeah.
There's those rockets, and they what size? 3-inch rockets, you
I think
said?
they were 3-inch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some would not fire, so you were in charge of making sure they were neutralized.
Yeah.
Now, those 40-millimeter guns, they wouldn't go 100 or 360 degrees. They had a safety so you wouldn't shoot your own ship. Is that right?
That's correct.
Same with your 20-millimeter guns.
Right.
Those guns are because you had not shoot your own men, and then it was very tedious not to shoot your own airplanes. You had to make sure you had a Japanese airplane, not an American. So
that's correct.
in war, a lot of times we shoot our own people, which is you got to be so careful of that.
Yeah. Some of our own men were killed when we heard the Japanese surrendered. A lot of the ships turned their guns up and fired into the air, and the stuff that came down killed some of our people. Not aboard our ship, but we didn't do that. We didn't fire up, but some did. And so it was really, it was when they really celebrated like that, it was nothing that you could see, fireworks any place, ever would match what we saw at Okinawa when all the ships got to firing into the air. It was unbelievable.
That would have been about June when you won the Battle of Okinawa, somewhere in June, but then they shot up and then the flak would come down, and the flak can be actually killed some people, so they probably quit doing that in the future.
Actually, yes, it sure was. It was very, very treacherous.
Yeah.
Another fun job that I had as an electrician, I had to climb all to the top of the mast to change the lighting.
Yeah, the masts are very high up there. It's probably about 40 feet off the ship. It's pretty high. You had to do that too?
I don't know that it was that high, but I thought maybe it was 25 foot, but it was just 1 foot over the other. And then I had to hold on to the crossbar and reach out and undo the globe that held the bulbs and change the bulbs up there. So that was one of the big things that I wouldn't particularly care about doing, but it had to be done because there were times when we had to signal other ships using those signal lights, and because they didn't want us to talk on the radio or anything. And it was rather harrowing to get up there.
Was the wind strong? Sometimes the wind?
There was nothing to hang on to except the pole with the ladder on it, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just 1 foot over the other. And it was quite hazardous, really. But you know, at my age, I guess I didn't think that much of it because you know, when you're younger, you know you can do most anything.
Yes.
And so it was.
Well, that's something, and nobody else wanted to do that. How many men were on your ship there, Don?
The ship was built for 65 men and 5 officers. Mm-hmm. But when we left Pearl Harbor, they brought a lieutenant commander aboard, and he had lost a destroyer, and he brought all his crew with him. So we had to dismantle the galley where we ate because we had to make more room for some of the crew that he brought with him, his signalmen and everything else, and people that waited on the officers and everything else. So it got to where we went from maybe 75 up to, I would say, around 85 people aboard ship. So it was rather crowded. So we did have a few fights now and then between ourselves, being that many fellows on that small a ship. Why, we didn't always get along just right. So it was pretty amazing. But all in all, we did get along well, I think.
Tell me how bumpy the ride was. You were a flat bottom boat or ship, and you know the LST's a flat bottom ship. Most ships had a keel, but you had no keel. So tell me how many times you got seasick and in bad seas. Tell me about some of those experiences.
Well, thank goodness, the only time I got sick was in the Atlantic Ocean when I first went aboard the boat, because I had never had any sea legs at that time, and I got kind of sick at that time. But then another time that I got really sick too was in the Pacific when we were going through storms. In fact, I think it was along the West Coast when we came from Oregon to San Diego. We were in a lot of bad storms, and I was in the generator room, and the fuel was spilling out on the floor, and the fumes were just unbelievable. I couldn't hardly breathe, and all of a sudden, all the lights and everything turned green on me, and I heaved until there was nothing left to heave, and I got the dry heaves, and I was sick as a dog. And after getting through that, and I was by myself on the midnight watch, which I did a lot of, and I recall after that happened, I said, whenever this happens again, and we are pitching and turning from one side to the other, and the fumes from the diesel engines come in there, from now on, I'm going to go upside and get some fresh air and then come back down. So I never did get sick after that at all.
That's pretty dangerous. Sounds like you had a tough job. Did they pick on you because you were junior?
No, I don't think so. The other two fellows were older than me. We had two electricians ahead of me, and they were both married.
Yes.
And when the war ended, they got to go back to the States, and that left me with it all. When
did you get out of the Navy, and when did your ship come back? Did you take the same gunboat back? And how many gunboats were there in the Navy?
Oh, I really don't know. We were the 108, and I don't know whether that meant that we were the 108th one that was made like that, or not. I just don't recall. But
you didn't mothball that, or did you come back to Oregon or somewhere else?
I brought it back to the same shipyard, and from there I was transferred to the Naval Hospital in Astoria, Oregon. There before I was brought back to Great Lakes, there by Chicago, where I was discharged.
Why were you at the hospital? Just working there, or just you're not a patient at the hospital?
I was a patient.
For what reason?
Maybe you didn't read the book. Oh, I had hemorrhoids, something
That's right.
awful.
Yeah.
It was like sitting on a bunch of grapes.
Yes.
And they were going to let me off and take care of me in Guam. And then they said they couldn't let me off. And then they said, well, we'll let you off when we get back to Pearl Harbor. And they didn't let me off there. So it wasn't until we got the boat back to Portland that they let me off and took me up to the Naval Hospital in Astoria, Oregon, where the whole wing